Well, hello there, my good friends. As it was ticking down to where it tells me I'm on live, I looked into the camera and realized, oh no, I had stuff all over my couch here and on. I had to pull things down very fast to get camera ready for you, or at least as best as I can get camera ready. It's been an extraordinarily busy day, hence I didn't have time to shave, really fix my hair or anything as far as getting camera ready. But when I saw how late it was, I figured I better log on here and I'll wait for some of you to come and join me. Um, I'm in the middle of, hey, Ward, you got a haircut? Tell me about it, Ward. What kind of haircut did you get? Or just a little cleanup overhaul? And I realized I just gave a product endorsement there. I didn't mean to do that. YouTube can be really strict about these things. Oh, more than one hair was cut. Well, good. No, that's the way you're supposed to do it, one hair at a time. And you know what you're making me think of, Ward? Um, First of all, anybody who watches this show knows I adore Barbara Streisand. Huge fan of hers, great admirer. But I did once talk to someone who did her hair once or did colored her hair. And we know that Ms. Streisand is known to be a mega perfectionist. And some have accused her of being quite difficult because of that. And he said that it was a salon on the Sunset Strip here in West Hollywood. And literally, you would think people would be like, oh, I want to do Barbara Streisand's hair. I want to be able to say that I've been her hairdresser. No, he said people would actually run in the back and hide. They didn't want to deal with her because she was so picky and demanding. When you said you had one haircut, the reason I'm thinking of this story is that he said because she'd come in to get all of her highlights done. And she would actually have the hairdresser take a needle and pull individual strands of hair to be streaked, one strand of hair at a time. And then she'd want a mirror and a magnifying glass to look at it herself before proceeding forward. And he said it took many hours to color her hair. It was such an ordeal. He said she was generous, she tipped well, lovely person, but very, very demanding. So I'm just envisioning you having one haircut at a time. The poor stylist there with a needle pulling the hairs up like they had to do with Barbara Streisand. Let's see if we can get some other people to come on here because you people are the lifeblood of the show, especially on days like this when I am just too busy to do any preparation beforehand. Um, I do my work for Dr. Whimsy as her assistant, Dr. Whimsy Anderson. Hi, Andy. Thanks for joining. And yeah, not that meticulous, quite that meticulous. But I have to do my work for her as her assistant, making a lot of calls to patients and clients. And I'm finding as of late, it's very difficult to coincide that with my 5 p.m. time for this show because I often have to get a lot of calls made before 5 p.m. because of the time difference with the East Coast, where it's already 8 p.m. and it's already absurdly late to be calling anyone. I once early on in my job make the Sasha's here jumping around. Oh, here she is. I made the absurd an egregious mistake of calling someone on the East Coast at 11 o'clock at night. And needless to say, they were very, very upset with me. And I don't blame them for being upset with me. So that's why I make 5 p.m. Pacific time, my cutoff time. How early do I start my calls, Ward? It all depends. Sasha, sorry, she had her claw caught in an Afghan here. Usually a few hours beforehand, and I do a lot of work from home. In fact, I do all my work from home. And sometimes I've even when people said, "Oh, isn't it easy for you?" And I'm like, "Well, it's nice to not have to commute and all that, but sometimes I work harder from home than I did when I had an actual business place to go to." Uh, it just depends on the day and what's there. And I try my very best to be as consistent as possible with this weekly show, because I haven't had time to make new videos. I have a big catalog on there, but it's been at least a year since I've made a new video. But to keep the channel alive, for want of a better way of saying it, I do this live stream every Monday, almost like a placeholder. It's like it's a contribution to keep the channel relevant, going. I really love the interplay with all of you. It even serves as a good warm up for me, to just do this and chat with all of you informally, because Tuesdays and Thursdays, those are my big days, where I have the shows with Dr. Whimsy to a much, much bigger audience. We've had some weeks where we've had as many as 20,000 people. So I have to be on my toes with that. Oh, thank you, Andy, for your sweet words. But I have to really be on my toes and be a lot more together for that. And yes, be on time for that. Yes, I have to be a lot stricter, all of that. I'd be very professional in how I conduct myself. And a lot of that is out of respect to Whimsy, Dr. Whimsy, who has been so very, very good to me. And I always strive to give my best to her as she gives her best to me. Whimsy's really the reason I'm even doing this show, doing this channel. I'm repeating myself, but yes, she's taken me out of my comfort zones and insisted that I do things that I maybe have rebelled against. Like, I don't want to do a live show. I can't do that. And she's like, yes, you can. You'll be on at 5 today. Bye. That's the way it was in the very, very beginning, not now, of course. But she always takes me out of my comfort zones and teaches me that I can do a lot more. I have a lot more potential than I ever dreamt that I had. And I think that's a good message for everybody. I find most people are guilty of not seeing their highest potential and possibility. And we do need that loving but stern person to take us by the hand and go, come on, you're doing it anyway. I once did this counseling intensive weekend workshop thing. Oh my God, it's many years ago. I can't remember what it was called. But one of the mantras they used to give us was, what the hell? Just do it anyway. Well, actually, it was another word than hell, and it began with an F, but you get the gist of it. I'm doing this show to keep my channel, Chuck's Captivating Chronicles, going and hopefully relevant. And I like connecting with all of you. And hi, Kelly. Thank you for joining. And because there just literally was no time to prepare for the show, I looked to you guys to be the lifeblood, to get the conversations going, to throw a topic my way. I mean, I can always come up with something. I've already thought of something I can talk about right now. One of the things also I've been doing today, and I mentioned this last week, I started on this massive organizational project. And it's one of those things where you just bite the bullet and do it. It's going to be unpleasant. It's going to feel torturous. It's going to feel like hell, but you got to do it. And that's what I'm working on right now. I have this enormous closet. I mean, it's a big walk-in closet, but over the decade or so I've lived here, I have managed to keep stuffing more stuff in there. It's the old sweep the dirt under the rug type of thing. Oh, I don't have any place for this. Throw it into the magic closet. Well, the magic closet ran out of fairy dust. And the magic closet is not so magical. It was so bad. I could barely get the door open. I could barely get in there to even find my clothes on the rack. I mean, it was just, I could not stand it any longer. Yeah, I warned you, Fibber McGee and Molly. Well, I would have given Fibber McGee a run for the money with my closet and all the stuff in there. So I just made a decision. This has got to be done. No way around it. I've got to just pull this stuff out and start sorting through it. What do I really keep? What really matters to me? What can I donate? And what do I just need to throw out? And that's, again, easier said than done. When if I had a nice big house and I had other rooms I could take this to, I could lay it out and sort through it nice and neat. No, I'm in a tiny little apartment, cute little apartment, but a tiny little apartment. And I have to just pile all the stuff up there in the living room, the bathroom, the kitchen, and just take a box at a time and sort through it. But it's a miserable way to live. My zodiac sign is Cancer. So we're very much about our homes. Could we say Cancers are pack rats also? I'm not going to dispute that. But you may ask, well, why do you have all of this crap? And I'm thinking to a conversation I had with my dear friend Pam yesterday, because she's also an artist. So she gets it. Those of us who are artists, we have all of our art supplies. We have all of our blank canvases. We have completed canvases. We have completed artwork. And there's only a finite amount of space to store all of that. So that's part of it right there. And then there are those things you don't want to throw out, like the Afghan and the quilt that my grandmother made for me, the quilt my mother made. You get the picture. They're just non-negotiable things you can't throw out, but yet where's a space to put this stuff? So I've been on Friday, I brought a lot of my stuff to my storage unit, and I was mentioning, yeah, I needed to shave today. Sorry about this. It's about 40 miles from where I live. And the reason for that is because storage units in Los Angeles are prohibitively expensive. And by going down to Santa Ana, I could get something for almost a third of the cost. But depending on traffic, sometimes I can get down there in an hour. When I went down there on Friday, it was 2.5 hours because of the traffic. And when I got there, I had about 15 minutes before closing. Storage units, for security reasons, have to be quite strict about times. And my storage unit closes promptly at 6 p.m. And the elevators will promptly stop working and will not take you up to your units. I was assured they would let you back down and that you could always go to a side door, pull it apart, and get out. So you're not trapped, because that was my first question. If I take longer than this, am I going to be locked in here for the night? And they said no. But I got there 15 minutes before 6 o'clock because of all the traffic. And I had to unload the van that I had rented. And by the time I got all that unloaded and got it to the elevator, I looked at the clock on my phone. I had 30 seconds. 30 seconds before 6 p.m. And I mean 30 seconds to get all that stuff in the elevator. Otherwise, my whole trip was going to have been for nothing. So I was going, oh, no, please God, let me get this stuff in here. Loaded up the elevator with seconds to spare, maybe 7 seconds. And I pressed the button, the elevator went up, and I was able to get the stuff in storage. And then I was so worn out the next day, I had to just rest. I had to rest. And then I started like, okay, now I'm going to tackle the rest of my closet. And I started pulling more stuff out. And now, and I'm not going to turn this camera around, because if you saw my living room, you'd know what I'm talking about. I have just as much crap as before. It's like when you steam the stain on the rug, it goes away, and then the stain rises up again. Like there was a stain behind the stain. There was all of these packed boxes and things behind the boxes. So that's where I am right now. And that's what I've been doing today, along with my work for Whimsy. And hence, I was about 16 minutes late coming on today. So I thank you for your presence. And I guess I should check some comments here. A lot of people saying hello to each other. Ward asking, how's the closet? Well, yeah, I just told. Andy, Chuck, I have one. Do you know any stories about Tony Todd, the guy who played Candyman in Final Destination, other movies? I am so sorry. I have never heard of Tony Todd. I'm not familiar with him. I'm sorry. My specialty is more old Hollywood. Wha Which I found out interesting. My dad died 10 years ago on New Year's Eve this year. Then January 14th, 26, Alan Rickman had gone 10 years. My dad and Alan Rickman died not too far apart. Oh my. When you say 10 years ago, New Year's Eve, you're reminding me of my own story. And I'm not, believe me, I hope this isn't disrespectful to your father or anything. Or Alan Rickman. I don't mean it that way in discussing a cat, but you've seen me with Sasha, and this was the cat I had before Sasha. And anybody who knows me, I love my pets just like people. Yeah, hear that, Sasha, wherever you are. And my last cat he was also a Siamese named Charlie. And I was very, very close to that cat. He was probably the most human-like pet I've ever had in my life. And he had cancer, and he started going downhill very rapidly, like within 2 months. And I was fighting to save his life. I spent a fortune in vet bills. I put him through a surgery, hoping it would save him. And I realized that all along he was just saying to me, I need to go. I want to go. It's okay. I was keeping him alive for me. And I think many of us can understand. But it was just a minute or two before the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, 2014, transitioning into 2015, like a minute or two before the stroke. And I was holding him in my arms, and he died. He passed away just before the stroke of midnight. And I guess he just did not want to go into 2015. He just didn't. And it tore me up. I couldn't even consider getting another cat for at least 6 months. I mean, I was in mourning. I mourned for that cat like a human being as much as any person. So anyway, that's what you made me think of, Andy. But I'm so sorry for the loss of your father. Oh, Sandra, thank you for your sweet words. That's so nice. And Andy, well, Dad died December 31st, New Year's Eve. Then Alan died January 14th. It's still pretty close. Ward, by the way, this week was the 30-something anniversary of my sister's passing. She's been out of this world longer than she was in it, and I was younger than her. Oh, I'm deeply, deeply sorry. I have a beloved sister. We're the only children, only siblings, and not much of my immediate family is still around except for my sister. And she's 14 years older than I am. And she just recently had a birthday, and good for her. She's in New York City right now with her daughters, and they saw a lot of Broadway shows, and she lives her best life. My sister has traveled the world, and she has been to every continent. And I mean literally every continent. She's been to Antarctica. She's even been to the North Pole. Everywhere, all over the world. And I mean, I've traveled a lot, mainly throughout Europe, but she has me beat there. But I'm so happy for my sister, and I love her dearly, even though we were born 14 years apart. It never seemed strange to me, oddly enough. And I've thought back on this. I thought about, the cartoon, The Jetsons. Remember Judy, the teenage daughter, and little boy Elroy? Well, that was like my sister and me. And I also thought of the Munsters, Marilyn all grown up, and then little Eddie Munster and all. So I just thought, okay, my sister and I are just like that. It was that kind of age difference. But she left for college the same year I started kindergarten. So we only had like 5 years or so where we were actually raised together. But I have a vivid memory. I remember her so well. But we went through a number of years where, we wrote letters, and we'd see each other maybe once a year, especially after she married her husband and they moved. We were from the East Coast at the time, and she moved out to Colorado with her husband. And so from that point on, I only saw her once a year. But it was after, really, I was in my late 20s, and I had moved out here to California, that we started to strike up a bond, a real real bond. I mean, not that we didn't have it before, but this was more like of an adult bond. We just started chatting on the phone, and we would get on the phone typically 2, 3, and 4 hours at a time, and we still do that. And I can honestly say my sister is my best friend in the world. Even with the vast age difference, we just have this remarkable connection. It's one of the reasons I believe in past lives, reincarnation. I'm certain we've been together many times before. Um, but Lord, I am sorry about the passing of your sister. Um, and this thing just jumped on me. Every time I tried to scroll down, it go bloop, and then I have to find my place again. Oh, wait, and sorry. By the way, my aunt died just a few days after Queen Elizabeth. Um, boy, been thinking about Queen Elizabeth a lot lately. With what's been going on with Prince Andrew, because supposedly Prince Andrew was Queen Elizabeth's favorite son, and many of the privileges, the stipends and money and titles and things, she was the reason for that. Prince Charles, well, then Prince Charles, I know he's King Charles now, had said previously, I remember reading an article, Vanity Fair, a few years before the Queen died. He said he definitely intended to cut Andrew off in his quest to streamline the royal family. So I think Andy has known this was coming, but yeah, I can only imagine what Queen Elizabeth would be thinking from the other side, feeling, seeing her beloved son, her favorite, being pared down like this, humiliated. Though I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. If the accusations are true, and I'm not going to go into that here. This is more what we talk about on Whimsy's show. I try to keep controversy off this show. But I just thought about that with Queen Elizabeth, and my dear friend Pam, who's quite psychic intuitive, was telling me about how she had channeled Queen Elizabeth recently. Andy, I love your stories. Do you have any more Valentino stories about Errol Flynn? I think, well, I believe last week I did tell only Errol Flynn story I could think of was the one. I'm sorry for repeating it here, but I'll just tell it quickly. To recap that I was close with Evelyn Keyes. She was a moderately big movie star during the 1940s, and I told the story about how she had a chance to have a one-night stand with Errol Flynn, and she chose to go home with John Huston instead. And I asked her about it. I said, Evelyn, you passed up Errol Flynn? Come on, for one night. And she said, Chuck, he was boring. He was vacuous. No, that's a turnoff to me. He was just another pretty boy actor with an empty head, how she put it. And she said, John Huston, on the other hand, no, not the most attractive man in the world, but he was smart and he was witty and captivating. And she found herself immensely attracted to that. And that's why she went home with him and later married him. So that's all I can think about with Errol Flynn. Maybe something will come to me. I know of a rather naughty, semi-naughty story that, oddly enough, Olivia de Havilland told. And I mean 90-year-old Olivia de Havilland, like very prim, proper, with the pearls and the hair pulled back in a bun, and very genteel elder stateswoman Olivia de Havilland. And it was on a DVD set. I think it was a set of Errol Flynn movies, and of course they did a lot of films together. Supposedly they had an affair in real life; they were in love. And Olivia was so proper. She was being interviewed, and like I said, her silver hair pulled back and pearls, and she was in her home in Paris, and she was talking about how when they were making Robin Hood, they would do their kissing scenes, and Errol would get a little too aroused. And the way Olivia put it, Mr. Flynn was having a problem with his tights. And the way she said it, so proper, I was drinking something, I spat it out, and I almost fell on the floor. It was so unintentionally funny, her delivery of that line. So I don't know, maybe some more will come to me. Valentino's stories. I can think of some. I know where he's buried. I've been to his, well, he's not buried, he's interred. He's in a wall crypt. And contrary to popular belief, it's not a grandiose grave, as many believe. There were intentions of building a grandiose grave for him, like statues and monuments and stuff. And his resting place was only intended to be a temporary resting place. Hence this little modest wall crypt in the corner of a mausoleum at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. It's very modest. I've been there. And it was meant to be temporary, but it ended up becoming his final resting place. He's been there. He died in 1925, so he's been there 100 years now. I don't think there's any plans to move him now. That's where he will remain. But as the show goes on, let me think about Valentino if I have any kind of story. Something of interest. I know one thing was interesting. It was on YouTube. He actually recorded a couple of songs. And so it's a rare chance to hear what his voice sounded like, because he was Italian. And there's questions over whether he would have succeeded in sound motion pictures because of his Italian accent. I don't know. Sound movies ruined a lot of people. A lot of major silent stars were ruined because of their speaking voices. Clara Bow, for example, had a heavy Bronx accent. Pola Negri, her accent was a problem. One of the few who had a heavy accent, and it actually worked to her advantage, was Greta Garbo. Garbo, with her thick Swedish accent, it just matched. It matched her on-screen presence. And Garbo was huge in silent movies, and she went on for well over a decade as a major, major star in sound motion pictures. She became even bigger, but she never lost that Swedish accent. Johnny Weissmuller. I don't know if I can think of too many stories about him either. I know, he was a big Olympic swimmer, won gold medals before he came to Hollywood to play Tarzan. And do you remember one sad story about him? It was toward the end of his life. He was in a nursing home and he had Alzheimer's. And sometimes he would start doing that, that Tarzan yell. Carol Burnett did that much better. He would be in his room, his room in the nursing room, and the nurses would hear him bellowing the Tarzan yell. That's kind of sad. Let's see. We did mention Sean Flynn last week. I'm afraid I don't know a whole lot about them. I'm so sorry. Maybe something will come to me. Kelly, decluttering is a miserable job. Oh God, is it ever? It's one of those things. In theory, it seems simple. Oh, I'll just move these things here. I'll sort through these things, put things back. No, the actual execution is another story. When you're sweating and it's hot, you're carrying these big, heavy boxes and you have no place to put them, and your living room starts piling up with all the stuff. But it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. I think of the analogy. It was actually a Science of Mind minister, a wonderful lady named Marlene Morris, Reverend Marlene Morris, who said to me, when you're taking on a project like this, think of it as the creation of your masterpiece. Like Michelangelo, and he was there chipping away at the marble and everything. You think there weren't like rocks everywhere and dust and clutter and chaos as this beautiful statue is being created. Often when you are creating your masterpiece, you have to make a big mess. to do it. Well, that's what I'm succeeding in doing right now. Oh my God. You said we're doing that to my father in law's house. He passed August 10th of this year. Wrench sets, screwdrivers, utility knives, more than we can count. I know exactly what you're going through because I have had to go through that on, I think it's 5 different occasions. And my sisters had to do a lot of this along with me. So we, we've shared the experience. Let me think. The first time we had to do it was when our aunt died, our unmarried aunt, and she had no children, and she had a little house. She was a college professor, and we had to go there and start going through the house. And our aunt, fortunately, you learn a lot about a person after they pass away and you have to go through their stuff. I mean, I know it's such an invasion of their privacy, but once a person is gone, you know, this is inevitable. It's going to happen to me. It's probably going to happen to most of us where somebody's going to be coming and going through all of our stuff. And we discovered what a pack rat she was. And, and she'd always had seemed so organized, so together, so on top of her situation. And then we started opening up drawers, and we must have found like 30 purses and all these hats and shoes and old appliances and stuff, and her closet's packed to the max, and we had to get all that down and sort through it. What do we keep? What do we throw away? What do we donate? Like you just said, all the screwdrivers and wrench sets and so forth. It's kind of like that. And all of her, and my aunt had so many cookbooks. I mean, my God, we had to donate so many of them. And but then let me see, what was the next house we had to do? Then it was our mother and father's house after my mom died, and my dad wanted to downsize and move to Colorado to be near my sister. So that was huge. That was huge. Again, it was my sister and myself, and she did get some of her kids to come and help, and our dad helped as best he could. He was in his 80s. We had an entire attic. We had an entire basement. We had an entire house full of furnishings, appliances, the garage. Oh, dear God. And we had 4 days to do this. So we were going non-stop. It was like one of those things where you just nap for 3 or 4 hours and then you get up and get back to work again because we had such a tight deadline. So we had to do that. And then there was the time I told the story about how I lost my apartment in West Hollywood because of rent control and these unscrupulous landlords who were harassing me, and I had to get a lawyer and we had to settle out of court. But part of the agreement of my settlement was I would move within 6 months. Well, I had to take that whole apartment apart from top to bottom, and I had lived there many years. So that was an ordeal. And then there was another time. Then I had a very dear friend, my dear friend Bart Andrews, who suffered a serious stroke and had to go into a nursing home. And there just was no one to help. His sister and her husband came out for a while. They helped as best they could. But for about 3 weeks, I had to clear that apartment out from top to bottom, all the furnishings, all the belongings. And dear Bart was a pack rat. And And I'm trying to think what the other example was, and I'm boring you. I don't need to keep going into all of this. But the fact is, I've done this many, many times already, and it never, ever gets easier, despite all the experience I should have accrued by now. Let's see, where's some other message here? Let's go back here. It moved on me. I gotta find my place again. Okay. And I still remember when I lost my Siamese cat and Dad wanted to bury it in the compost pile. Oh, I teased Dad about it growing cattails and pussy willows. Back then, Dad grew corn where we live. Oh, yeah. Siamese cats are especially hard to lose because they are so intelligent, and they do take on a lot of human qualities. They actually will speak to you. They listen to you, and they actually speak to you in tones in their meows where you can understand them almost. Um, let's see here. Sandra, I'm a bit jealous. My twin brother died in 2022. I'm so sorry. We were really close. Talked to him every day. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing thing. I have known people who have bitter, bitter relationships with their siblings where they don't even speak anymore. And then there are situations like ours, like you, Sandra, with me, with my sister, where life would be unthinkable without them. And when you think about it, it's an older sibling. They have known us. My sister has known me since the day I was born. She's the one person on the planet Earth I can say that about. And I mentioned it to her, and she wasn't too impressed with it. It was like, well, of course. It was like, duh. But to me, I was like, I think that's remarkable to know someone from day one of their life until they're now old. What was it? Looking at the comments here. Ward, I hated how that TV movie put words in Miss de Havilland's mouth and she sued, but lost. Well, you got to understand that with most of those biopic films, writers do have to take poetic license. They weren't there in the room hearing these people, so they have to capture the spirit of what was being said. But obviously, it displeased Miss de Havilland, and I think she was like 102 at the time when she launched that lawsuit. And for many years, it's the miniseries Feud about Susan Sarandon and Jessica Lange were in it, and Catherine Zeta-Jones played Olivia de Havilland. And that miniseries was not re-aired for a long, long time. Like, it wasn't released on DVD or Blu-ray or anything, and it was because of the lawsuit from Olivia de Havilland. Even though she lost, it did drag it out for several years. Kelly asking, is Valentina the one that had a cursed ring? I haven't heard that. I'm sure there's a lot of made up legend and folklore attributed to Valentino that somehow weaved its way into biographies and became construed as fact. So I haven't heard that. Maybe somebody else out there has. And what was this? Mr. Valentino was the first person in the family who had gotten some means. And I'm not sure how long the heirs kept any monies. That would be something interesting to pursue and to check into. I really don't know. And then a lot of those stars didn't have as much money as you would think because they often lived to excess. That attitude that this is never going to go away. I'm always going to be rich. I'm always going to be famous. Oh, I'll have another hit movie after this movie, so I'll have more money coming in. That kind of thinking. And it's not impossible. When Valentino died, there wasn't as much as they thought. The reason I'm bringing it up, James Dean. A lot of people assumed that James Dean was very wealthy and he died and he left a fortune to his family. That wasn't the case at all. He had only made 3 motion pictures that he'd starred in, only 3. And 2 of those movies didn't come out to after he died. So really the only big film he had at the time of his death was East of Eden, which had come out in, I think, April of 54, and he died September 30th. No, pardon me, April of 1955. Pardon me there. And then, of course, he died September 30th of 1955. So Jimmy was just getting himself established, really. And I read in a biography that about a week before he died, because Warner Brothers knew they had a major, major star in their hands, based on the film that had already been released. East of Eden was a huge hit, and they could see from Rebel Without a Cause and Giant, they knew they had big hits and they knew they had a big star. And so I read that James Dean was signed to a 10-picture $1 million contract. In 1955, $1 million was huge. What can we say today? $1 million just doesn't stretch as far as it used to. But and, and back in those days, I don't know what that equated to, but it was an enormous salary. It was the up until that time, it was the biggest ever given to a star. But Jimmy died and he never got to make those movies. So that $1 million never manifested. And the family was not left with that much money. And I know this because I spent time in Fairmount. I spent time with Marcus Winslow Jr., his closest surviving relative. He and Marcus were first cousins, but they were raised together in the same farmhouse as brothers. They were raised together. They were close as brothers. And Marcus was telling the story of how the family was actually, this was several years after James C. died, the family was in dire financial trouble and they were on the verge of losing the farm, literally losing the farm. And it was around this time a Los Angeles entertainment attorney flew out to Fairmount, Indiana, and Marcus was out there working in the farm field or something. And here's this man in a suit with a briefcase saying, "Could I please have a meeting with you?" And the discussion was, have you ever considered marketing and licensing the image of James Dean? This is a very common thing now, but at that time, it was almost unprecedented. It had rarely been done. And Marcus, felt that, well, what have we got to lose? Let's give it a try. Well, needless to say, all of those posters and t-shirts and dolls and license plates and all the stuff you can think of that has James Dean's images brought in millions and millions of dollars to the family. Needless to say, they saved the farm. To this day, Marcus Winslow still lives in that farmhouse. It's been beautifully refurbished. He's got beautiful white horses outside. Uh, he has a passion for collecting cars, and he built this beautiful high-tech garage filled with vintage automobiles. He must have millions of dollars worth of cars in there. But Marcus is the sweetest man. He was so kind to me. And I know he'd rather have taken his Sunday and watched a football game on TV, but he spent the time with me, spent a whole afternoon with me, just answering all my questions about James Dean. I learned so much about him. And he was telling stories like about how they were one of the first families in Fairmount to have a television. This was the early 50s. This was like 1951 or so, 52. Jimmy had gone to New York to be an actor, the hopes of being on Broadway, but that's where a lot of live television dramas were produced. So Jimmy found a niche in live television. So the family had to buy a television so they could see him when he did all of his shows. And I asked Marcus, well, did you call him on the phone after the show was over? And he said, oh, no, long distance was too expensive in those days. We didn't do that. And he said sometimes we'd see him on TV and he'd look so thin and we'd worry about him. And he said my mother and father were always sending him money and helping him out. But they worried about how thin he looked on television. And something was really interesting. I asked Marcus, I said, did Jimmy, and I say Jimmy, there's a lot of like, was he James Dean? Was he Jimmy Dean? Well, according to Marcus, it was Jimmy Dean. He said we all called him Jimmy. Nobody called him James. That was just like his formal name for acting. He was Jimmy. But I said, when Jimmy was in high school, did he ever talk about being a star, going to Hollywood, being in the movies? And Marcus said, no, he kept that all to himself. He never shared that with us. The only thing was we knew he was an artist. We knew he loved to draw and paint and sculpt, and he was always in his bedroom doing that. So we knew that about him. And the first clue we had that he wanted to be an actor was when he won a public speaking contest and went on to become the district champion in Indiana, and that's when they first had a clue that, oh, yeah, this kid's got some talent here. Um, so they knew that, but no, they were surprised as anyone when he wanted to be an actor and go off to New York, and then of course went out to Hollywood. And Marcus told me about how after he had finished East of Eden, um, the local movie theater in Fairmount they were going to show it, premiere it that Saturday night. I don't think it was the world premiere, but they were going to premiere it there that Saturday night at 10 in the morning on Saturday. They had a special screening just for the family, for Jimmy's aunt and uncle and Marcus. And I think there were a few other people, a screening just for them. And Marcus was a little boy at the time. And of course, James Dean appears in the first minutes of the film, and just those first 5 minutes, he grabs you, he captivates you. It's such a magnetic performance. And Marcus said he was just sitting there looking up at the movie screen. Like, that's Jimmy. He was so proud of him and so excited to see him like that. I don't think he'd seen him for a few months. And Marcus told me, of James Dean's 3 movies, East of Eden was the one that came the closest to matching his real life personality. He said Jimmy was basically playing himself in that movie. So that was interesting. Anyway, that's my tangent, Ward, on you asking about Valentino and being of means and leaving his heirs money, because that's an example I know personally where James Dean didn't have a lot of money to leave his family. But boy, he came through later, with all the licensing and the royalties. And I know Jimmy would have been so pleased about that. When I was in Fairmount, I got to see a much more human side of him outside of the legend that makes it into the biographies, because I got to meet his family. I also got to meet a couple of people in their 90s who went to school with him, knew him personally. So I heard some great stuff. I also mentioned that James Dean's grave. James Dean is buried, like, I'm guessing roughly a half mile down the road from the farmhouse. And I always thought, before I went to Fairmount, I thought, well, what a shame he was never buried out here in LA, in Hollywood. He belonged here. No, after I was in Fairmount, went to the farm, met the people, fell in love with the town. It is a charming, charming town. And I was at James Dean's grave a few times, and I thought, no, Jimmy is buried exactly where he's supposed to be buried. He's where he belongs. And I also told the story of how the first time, I think I told this last week, the very first time I went to his grave was 10:30 at night. Reason, because I had just been picked up from the airport in Indianapolis and driven to Fairmount, and it was late at night, and the friend I was with said, hey, you want to see Jimmy's grave? And I said, I'd love to. So it was 10:30 at night, pitch black, other than the headlights in the car, no security. This is a little country cemetery, no security, no cameras, nothing. I was out there in the pitch black, wind howling. It was cold. It was 2 nights before Halloween, and I had the auto headlights. I have a little video of myself with my hair blowing, and there I am with James Dean's tombstone. But I wasn't creeped out by it, not at all. This is Andy, Buster Keaton, and Chaplin weren't ruined in their speaking movies. No, not at all. But in Buster Keaton's case, his career declined considerably once he went into sound. The public didn't really quite accept him. It just didn't quite gel the same as when he was a silent star. But it was other factors, and I've discussed this before, about how he had signed with MGM, and MGM took away all of his creative control that he had once had and used so effectively in the silent era during his stardom. MGM didn't understand him, and they were trying to force him to do things he didn't want to do and he didn't excel in. Chaplin got around it, actually, by basically still making silent movies. Watch, I'm watching, make sure Sasha's not getting my stuff here. His first movie in the sound era was a film called City Lights, made in 1931, and it was basically a movie with an orchestral score and sound effects, but it was still a silent movie. And Modern Times in 1936 was pretty much the same formula. It was basically a glorified silent movie, just with the sound effects and the music. Um, Chaplin did not actually speak in a film until 1940. It was the film The Great Dictator. And he played a dual role. And one was The Great Dictator, and it was not so loosely based on Adolf Hitler. And the resemblance with the little mustache and everything was just like too much. Chaplin even said in latter years, he said if he had really known of all of the full atrocities in the concentration camps and what was going on, he never would have made that movie. No way. But he said at the time he wasn't fully aware. And if you'll recall, the end of that movie is a beautifully impassioned speech for world peace. And it's magnificent. And Chaplin's his alter ego character was a variation on the Little Tramp, but Chaplin was famous in saying, I know this is the last time I will ever play the tramp because I have allowed him to speak. I will never play him again. But this is how he chose. Sasha, sorry, Sasha, no, no, she's getting on one of my paintings here. And don't want to get up. Sasha, okay. He said, I know this is the last time I'm going to do the Little Tramp, but he took the character out in such a big way by doing that beautiful speech at the end. And I'm afraid she's going to rip one of my paintings here. Oh, Sasha, come on. Sorry. No, no, no. Sorry about that, but I have a canvas painting. I was afraid she was going to rip it. She was trying to climb up it. Okay. So anyway, that was the fate of Charlie Chaplin, and he did make a handful of more films, where he spoke. And Chaplin had a beautiful speaking voice, but it just did not really gel with the Little Tramp persona. Andy, did Carol Burnett do the Tarzan yell because of Weissmuller? Absolutely, she did. She, as a girl, she used to go to the movies all the time, and she grew up in downtown Hollywood, and yeah, she was very much watching the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies. That's where she got that from. Sandra, there must have been so. Oh, I can't read this. Sorry, Sorry, I just lost my place again. Let me go back. I don't know why this jumps when I try to go down. Now I've got to find my place. Okay, there must have been so ethical. You were typing something, it didn't come out. There must have been something the air because I cleaned and will start decluttering next week. I'm seriously thinking of moving to Italy. Oh, Sandra, that's exciting. I'm thinking of that movie with Diane Lane. What was the title? Something Tuscany. And I had a friend who was considering doing that, but she gave up on the idea. But oh my gosh, that's wonderful. I very much want to take another trip to Italy. I haven't been there in many, many years, and I don't know when I'm going to do it. Maybe next year. Most of my time, hey Chris, how you doing? Yeah, most of my time in Italy was northern Italy, and it was in Venice. I was in Venice for about 5 days, 5 of the best days of my life. I wanted to go back there on one of my big birthdays, and that big birthday coincided with the little thing you may recall, the 2020 pandemic lockdown, where nobody was going anywhere. I ended up spending that birthday sitting on this couch in my living room, just talking on the phone. So much for going back to Venice, but I'm going to go back there someday. I know I am. But yeah, Sandra, keep us enlightened about that. Hey, Jim, thank you for joining. Everybody's saying hello to each other. It's like a little party here. What was it? Oh, that reminds me. Whatever happened to Prince Andrew after he got in trouble for, I can't remember what. Well, it's again, like I was talking about it earlier. I don't want to go into a lot of that here because I say that more for Dr. Whimsy's show. That's where we get into all the controversy and all of the big news events and things. I try to keep this show a little more neutral friendly, but it was because of his involvement with Epstein, and a lot of it still has not been uncovered, but it was bad enough for the royal family that well, the official story is that he voluntarily gave up his titles, but most of the news media I've been reading was he was issued ultimatums by King Charles and Prince William, though technically he does still have his titles. It requires an act of parliament to fully strip away titles, but he's just not going to use them anymore. And of course, that also means Sarah Ferguson is now Sarah Ferguson. She cannot refer to herself as the Duchess of York. Oh, for us to have such problems like that, right? Well, Sydney says, hi, Queen Elizabeth stripped him of his titles. He pretty much lives in seclusion now. Well, I do know that. I know it was a few years back, Queen Elizabeth did take away a number of his royal titles because I think he had to testify, and the woman who was accusing him of raping her, and Epstein. Again, I'm not trying to get into all this, but Queen Elizabeth said, if you are doing this, you're going to do it as a private citizen and not as a royal. And as I understand it now, it's just the remaining titles, like Duke of York, for example, Order of the Garter, things like that. Those were the titles he claims to voluntarily have stopped using, though I think it was more of a case he was forced to. And yeah, I've heard he's in seclusion, but I understand he still lives on the property of Windsor Castle. And it's like a 30-room mansion on the property, and even though they divorced many years ago, he still lives with Sarah Ferguson, and they've remained close friends. And I also remember reading at the time of the Queen's death that she was very fond of Sarah, and the corgis. I think there were 4 of them. Someone asked what happened to the Queen's corgis. She left them to Sarah to take care of. Yeah. What was this word? But they said Mr. Haviland said stuff on TV about the Mrs. Crawford and Davis, and she never did any interviewers mention them on TV. I'm not sure if I understand your statement there, but they said Mr. Haviland said stuff on TV about Crawford and Davis, and she never did any of the interviews mention them on TV. I don't know. I think, again, like I said, I think the writers were taking poetic license and trying to capture the spirit of what she could have said, because obviously they were not in the room hearing the actual dialogue. They didn't have tape recorders or anything. Like if you remember that mini series, they also have big scenes where they're visiting the home of Hadda Hopper, and there's all this dialogue. They had to have made that up. Sometimes I wonder if Mr. Haviland, being 102 years old, maybe she was just hypersensitive. Maybe she misconstrued things. I watched the miniseries. I didn't think it was all that defamatory or anything, but it's up for opinion. Chris, did you know that in 61 there was a TV pilot film for Some Like It Hot? It had Tina Louise. No, I didn't know that. I bet Tina Louise was good in that because her Ginger Grant character, let's face it, was basically a poor man's Marilyn Monroe. It's Marilyn Monroe as a redhead, but she was doing a lot of the voice and the mannerisms. And I think it was even described in the script that the role of Ginger Grant was a combination of Lucille Ball and Marilyn Monroe. But I didn't know there was a pilot film for Some Like It Hot. I wonder if that still exists anywhere. I'd like to see it. Um, oh yeah, Andy, that's what I was talking about. A lot. There are cases of celebrities who lived way over their heads. This idea that it's never going to go away. Oh, I've spent all my money, but I'll have another hit movie, and I'll have a hit movie after that, and the money will just keep flowing and flowing and flowing. And some of them found that was not the case. It eventually ran out for them. What was this? Renee is here, and hi, Renee. Yeah. Oh, Jim. Oh, yeah. I've been talking. I'm going back old comments here. Yeah, that would have been a great contract for Jimmy. He was contracted with Warner Brothers to make 10 movies for $1 million. I mean, there was just no question. He was going to be a major, major star. And he died before that could happen. Okay, I got people saying hello here. I'm going to try to do this slowly so my screen doesn't blip. Oh, yeah, Warren. Then there were people who got badly ripped off. Oh, especially a lot of child stars. You mentioned Baby, Peggy, made about $1 million as a toddler, but her parents blew most, and the step grandfather ripped off the rest. Oh, yeah. In fact, there's a law to this day called the Coogan Law. And speaking of Charlie Chaplin, there was a 1921 movie called The Kid with a very young Jackie Coogan. Jackie Coogan later went on to not be such a cute little boy. He grew up and he played Uncle Fester on The Addams Family. But anyway, he was an adorable little child star. The Kid with Charlie Chaplin was a huge, huge hit. And I think most of his movies, Silence as a child star, probably don't exist anymore, but he made a fortune and his family got a hold of it and went through all the money. And so there was a law passed in California to protect child stars where a certain amount of their money earned has to be put into a trust fund. And that doesn't always protect them because there's the story of Lauren Chapin, who was played Little Kitten. That was her nickname on the show, Kitten, on Father Knows Best, which was a major hit in the 1950s. She made a lot of money. As a child, her money was put in a trust fund, and the agreement was that she could collect when she was 18. And she has told this story of when she turned 18, she cashed out her entire trust fund, took a bunch of friends to Las Vegas, and went through the whole trust fund that weekend. Blew everything. And that has happened to other child stars where, unfortunately, because how they were raised and they didn't learn how to manage their money, take care of themselves. A lot of stories of kids like that becoming adults and losing all their money. I think it's this attitude of it'll never go away. It'll just keep replenishing, and that's not always the case, as many of us know. Andy, has a celeb ever been scammed out of their money? I'm sure there are many stories along those lines, but I'm trying to think of a specific, maybe something will come to me, but yeah, sure. My friend Evelyn Keyes, I can't say she was necessarily scammed, but she lost a lot of her money to Mike Todd. And she acknowledges that a lot of it was her own fault. This was when she was in a relationship with him. She was engaged to be married to him, and he dumped her for Elizabeth Taylor. And that's a whole other story. But he persuaded Evelyn to invest a lot of her money in his production company and also his Todd AO widescreen film process. She invested a lot of her money into that. And she said where her fault was, she didn't have written agreements. She didn't have contracts. She trusted him. And it wasn't that Mike Todd was going to cheat her or anything, even though he did cheat. He left her for Elizabeth Taylor. it wasn't like he was cheating her out of her money, but he got killed, of course, in a plane crash. And then Evelyn had no proof. She had no contracts, no documentation to prove the money she had put into the company. And so she lost out big time. Let's see. What was it? This Jim Henson's Muppet. Rolf had a regular gig on the singer Jimmy Dean's live TV show in the late 50s. I was going to say also, we were talking about Charlie Chaplin. Jim Henson bought the Chaplin studios. I think it was back in the 90s, I think. And to this day, there is as an homage to Chaplin, Kermit the Frog is on top of the roof, dressed with Charlie Chaplin with the cane. Oh, hi, Joyce. Hey, I had fun chatting with you by text yesterday. Hope you're feeling better. Let's see. Sir Chuck, ever see James Dean cartoon he himself hand drew about bullfighting? It was surprisingly accurate in terms of technique instead of any kind of spoof. Oh, yeah, I've seen that. In fact, I've seen the original. It's in the James Dean Museum in Fairmount, Indiana. And I think they even had it digitally scanned. And for a time, they were selling prints of it. James Dean was quite the artist. And let's see, where's some other comments here. And I'm checking time because I'm pretty sure Anastasia, she's back. She's back in town. I'm pretty sure she's going to do her live stream at 7. I haven't heard otherwise, and I certainly don't want to compete with her. Everybody's saying hello to each other. Yes, Jim. Oh, no, not your painting. Yeah, no, I saved it. But little Sasha here was trying to climb up it, and she did it. She once ripped one of my canvas paintings with her back claws. And there was another time her back claws punctured because she was trying to climb up it. And you know how cats use their back legs to propel themselves. Oh, Sasha, I'm sorry. You were sleeping. Let me put you back where you were. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay, Andy. She is going live tonight. Thank you. I figured she was. Oh, that's right, Joyce. 7 p.m. is 9 p.m. for you, and that's late for you right now. Well, you'll be there in heart and soul and spirit. Yeah, she was with her friend near Banning in the mountains, and she's been working with her, but also just having some fun and relaxation. It's a good environment for her. It agrees with her. Good to get out of the city. I like being in the city, but I think for her it's a little too much at times. She gets overwhelmed with all the energy here. I look at it, I like the energy. One of the things I love about Los Angeles is just all of the collective talent we have here. And I don't mean just actors. We have musicians, singers, we have writers, we have designers, set designers, costume designers, dancers. There's so much talent in Los Angeles. It's the music industry and it's the television industry, the movie industry. Just tens of thousands of people here. And I tap into that. I always have ever since I came here. But yeah, Jim's just saying Joyce. She will definitely be there in our hearts. Oh, you may show up to say hi. Well, I know she'll appreciate that. She will. Looking at Sasha here. She's like, why did you tear up this house? Why can't you put it back the way it was? I don't like this. I don't like all these boxes and stuff. Well, Sasha, I'm doing the best I can right now. I'm grudgingly going to have to make another trip down to my storage unit. I already know that. Putting off the inevitable. I put somehow holding to this fantasy. Well, maybe if I find enough stuff to throw out and donate, I won't have to do that. And that actually is an incentive there, but I'm not finding too much because when I moved to this apartment a decade ago, I had already done a lot of my sorting out and prioritizing. And I had already stripped it down to the basics. So there's not a whole lot to get rid of unless I start throwing out heirlooms like like the Afghan my grandmother hand crocheted for me. You know what I mean? It's just things like that you can't throw away. Yeah, I don't even feel like putting them in storage units. Uh, yeah, Joyce, cats are funny. They do like consistency. And I think cats are very much about their environments. And it's upsetting to them to have their habitat and their environment upset or rearranged in any way. Um, but how's your kitty, Joyce? Your little Maya? She's quite beautiful. And I'm here petting Sasha right now. I'm not getting her up because she's making it very clear she wants to lie here and go to sleep. And she did not appreciate me waking her up just for the sake of holding her up to the camera. Yeah, Joyce, especially if they're indoor kitties, and that's what Sasha is. She has spent her entire life indoors. And I mean, she was born indoors. Uh, the only time she's ever been outside is when she's been in the carrier to be put in my car, like either to bring her here from the breeder in San Diego or to take her to the vet, like for her shots or the time I took her to be spayed. But other than that, she's never been out of this apartment. And she's so good. She doesn't even try to run out the door, which I'm told is unusual. I've had other cats, the moment you open a door, they make a beeline. But no, she wants to stay in here. This is what she knows. It's what she feels safe about. What was this where you think cats may want to keep their homes the same so they can map out their prey? That's a good point. That's where some of that could come from. It's like cats are very good with their night vision. They actually use their whiskers to feel around, keep their balance. Their hearing is very sharp. So I hadn't thought about that. It could be about having everything already mapped out and arranged. So that makes it less stressful, easy for them. But I never um, never really want to take her outside. I've had people say to me, "Oh, why don't you put a leash on her? Our harness? Why don't you take her outside? Why don't you carry her outside?" No, I don't want her to get a taste of the outdoors because I figure it's actually a good thing that she likes her home and she knows her home and doesn't try to run away. I'm afraid if I took her out, she might get a little too much of a taste of that, and it's not really safe for her because where I live, there's a very busy road. It's like one of those 24-hour streets where there are always cars going up and down, up and down. And it's that in itself is very unsafe for a cat. But also we have a problem here. I'm near Griffith Park, the mountains. So we have a lot of coyotes come down at night. Every night I see coyotes walking on the sidewalks here. Raccoons, skunks, snakes. I've heard horror stories of people walking their little dogs and coyotes leaping out of bushes and attacking the dogs. I don't want Sasha going outside. And also, I've thought about this. She's a purebred Siamese, and unfortunately, there are a lot of unscrupulous people who, frankly, would see her and steal her. They saw her out, see a purebred Siamese. They would just grab her and run. And I'm always sad when that happens, when pets get stolen, because I look at it this way. It's certainly devastating for the owners, but I think it's much more devastating for the pet because the pet doesn't understand. Why did you take me away from my home? Why did you take me away from my family? Why are you feeding me this food that I don't know? All that. It's so cruel to a dog or cat to steal them. And that happens. It happens. There was a big problem. I don't hear about it so much now, but there was a big problem with French bulldogs being stolen here in Los Angeles. I mean, people would be out walking their dog and a car would pull up and the person would be held up at knife or gunpoint and the dog would be taken away and thrown in the car and they'd drive off and then never see their dog again. And often those stories would get covered on the local news here. People devastated. It happened to Lady Gaga's two French bulldogs. She was away making a movie, and her assistant was out walking the two dogs, and he got badly beaten. He was hospitalized for a while. The two dogs were stolen, and of course, it was because it was Lady Gaga. It was all over the national news. It was big, and the dogs were recovered, but just the same, her assistant was badly injured. I think he might have even been shot over it. I know he had to be hospitalized for quite a while. And I know that Lady Gaga took very, very good care of him. Was very grateful to him. And she, of course, was devastated. I think she even offered something like a $500,000 reward, no questions asked, just bring my dogs back. But there's a big black market for French bulldogs because they're so valuable. Let's see, where's some comments here. But Andy's award ended. Too bad there's no Beep Beep the Roadrunner to combat all those Acme coyotes in LA. Yeah. Whenever I watch those cartoons, I'm always on the side of the Roadrunner. I mean, of the coyote. I'm always on the coyote side. Wile E. Coyote. It's like, grab that damn bird, that obnoxious bird, that beep beep. Blah, 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 you know? I always had allegiance with the poor coyote who kept falling off the cliff, kept getting hurt, but somehow kept surviving. But I will say this about coyotes, because I tend to take a lot of walks in the evening, so I see them all the time. I used to be a little scared of them, and then I realized they're pretty gentle. They're actually afraid of humans. That's my experience. They're very shy and skittish when you approach them, and they'll often run away. Now, I realize they also will eat your dog and cat, and I have heard stories where they will attack people, but that's just been my personal experience. They tend to be very sweet and very shy, and they're also related directly to dogs, so they have a lot of dog-like personality about them. Chuck, did you see the Vincent Van Meow line? No, I didn't. I'm sorry. You'll have to repeat that for me. I don't know if I can find it. Apologize. It's hard to keep up with all the lines and talk here. Jim, I rooted for the poor coyote too. One thing, when I see real coyotes, it makes me realize how well done the animators drew Wile E. Coyote. He looks just like the real coyotes. They just captured it. Oh yeah, Wile E. Coyote should have just used his Acme funds to go to Grubhub, get some fried chicken. Yeah, it would have been easier. Maybe he couldn't find it out in the desert. Hey Danny, I'm fine. How are you? Or do you think today Wile E would get if he sued Acme? Wait, what does that say? Today Wile E would get it, or if he sued Acme? I don't know. I don't know if we could sue Acme or not. It would spoil the whole point of those wonderful cartoons, which suspended belief. Wait, Chuck said with Sasha in the painting, she thought she was a regular Vincent Van Meow. Oh, it's cute. Did you know that Chaplin was haunted by the fact that he and Hitler's birthdays were a mere 4 days apart? I had forgotten about that because I knew they both had April birthdays, and they it was pretty close. And I think I read that before he started filming The Great Dictator, because he wrote that, he directed it, starred in it, produced it, he consulted with an astrologer, and I think that was pointed out to him. A lot of the spooky similarities between them. It's also something I've always found it an interesting parallel that Franklin Roosevelt and Adolf Hitler died within days of each other. The force of good, the force of evil, you go into all the parallels there. Jim Hack, I was riding my bike once evening here in Western Pennsylvania, and it ran fast in front of me, but luckily missed me. He didn't seem to have interest in me anyway. I guess you're talking about a coyote there. Hopefully not a mountain lion. We certainly have those out here also. I don't know if any of you remember P-22, the mountain lion. It often made the national news. Well, P-22 was captured a block and a half from where I live. P-22 was in my neighborhood. But I read about him, and while he certainly devoured a lot of dogs and cats, there was never once of a report of him ever attacking or harming a human being, ever, in the some 14 years. And if you know the story of P-22, he crossed over it wasn't one, it was two freeways. He crossed over from the mountains, and he ended up here in Griffith Park. And it was actually a very sad story, because poor thing did not know how to get back home. So he was stranded here. And being the only mountain lion, he could never mate. He could never have cubs. He had a very lonely life. And he was spotted many times on security cameras in Griffith Park walking by. There's a very famous photograph of him with the Hollywood sign behind him at night, and his eyes are flashing with the light. He was very beautiful. And there were reports of sightings of him here in the Los Feliz neighborhood toward the end. And from the pictures and videos, experts were determining that he seemed like he was very sick. He's not well. And there was belief that he had even been hit by a car. So there was a plan to try to capture him, to try to give him veterinary care. And that's when he was found about a block and a half where I live, in somebody's backyard. They captured him and caged him, tranquilized him. And of course, it turned out that he had been hit by a car, but more than that, he was very ill. He was determined to be about 14 years old, and that's actually the average lifespan of a mountain lion. So he was near the end of his life, and a decision was made to euthanize him. And that made a lot of people here in LA very sad, because he had become quite loved. He was like an unofficial mascot here. And at the nearby Greek Theater, they had a memorial service for him with a lot of celebrities performing music on stage. And it was done as a benefit for wildlife. And I very much wanted to go. I live near the Greek Theater, and I checked online, and every single ticket was sold out. It was within an hour, every ticket was sold out. But I'd like to have been there. And one of the things they're doing in the honor of P-22 to hopefully prevent a tragedy like this from happening again, there's this bridge overpass built, I think, in Thousand Oaks or Woodland Hills, in that area, over the freeway, being built with the intention of it being an animal crosswalk. And it's nearly constructed, I think. And part of the plan is to take this overpass and plant shrubs and trees and vegetation, so it will look very normal for the animals to cross over, and they can go back and forth each way. If something like that had existed, perhaps P-22 would not have been stranded over here in Griffith Park and left to live, for him, a very diminished life. Let's see. Yeah, I'm looking at the time. It's almost Anastasia time. Thank you for reminding me. I'll sign out soon. Renee, I had a mama bear with 3 cubs in my backyard. Went in the house because she was circling around us. I don't blame you. I would have done the very same thing. Sometimes here in the local news, we get stories like that of bears where they'll go in people's backyards and they'll go swimming in the swimming pools. There was once a bear that actually got in the hot tub. The bear was just like enjoying himself. That's one of the things, like around where I live, around the Hollywood Hills and so forth. Nature's does not let us forget that it rules. I heard the story once of people who went away for a weekend and came back to find their house, the inside, almost destroyed. This whole pack of raccoons, is that the right word for it? A whole bunch of raccoons came down the chimney through the fireplace, got in the house, and proceeded to destroy it. They have very sharp claws and teeth, ripped up all of the upholstery, like the sofa and the chairs, leather chairs, ripped them up, ripped up the rugs, defecated all over the place, went in the kitchen, opened up the cabinets, got into all the food, threw stuff down, opened up the refrigerator, broke the eggs, like ate the eggs, smashed them on the floor, milk cartons. It was thousands and thousands of dollars worth of damage when they came back, what those raccoons had done. Um, what was this here? Some other comments here. Pool. I wonder if a bear would know how to climb and use a diving board or slide. Now that would be a funny sight to see. It's not impossible. One quick question. Did you ever hear of Joan Blondell and Elizabeth Taylor compare notes on Mike Todd and or Lucy? Not that I can think of. I don't know. I mean, I know that Evelyn, this was after Evelyn married Artie Shaw, the famous clarinet player. Um, she and Artie went to visit Elizabeth Taylor and Mike Todd. And Evelyn said Elizabeth was just so gracious and warm to her. And they had a lovely, lovely visit. But, it would be interesting. And so I don't know if there were notes to compare. But I've never heard about Joan Blondell and Elizabeth Taylor comparing notes about Lucy. I know that Joan Blondell and Lucy had been friends back in the 30s, back in the RKO days, but they did not do too well together. It was after Vivian Vance had left the Lucy show in 1965. And so Lucy was experimenting with different actresses. She wanted a new sidekick of sorts, and she thought Joan Blondell would be a good fit. Well, it wasn't a good fit. They didn't just clashed when they were working together. And supposedly there is the story. This is in front of the studio audience, and they were filming. And Lucy did not like Joan Blondell's line delivery. And Lucy pretended, like the old water closet toilets where you pull the chain. Lucy just reached up and pulled a chain like she was flushing a toilet. And Joan Blondell was furious. And in front of the studio audience, I'll keep my language clean here, she said, F dot dot you, Lucille Ball. F you, Lucille Ball, in front of the studio audience. It was needless to say, Joan Blondell was not asked back to the Lucy show after that happened. Now, Elizabeth Taylor, I think it was more Richard Burton who had more of the problem with Lucy when he and Elizabeth guest starred on the show. Though Elizabeth Taylor, because Lucy was very strict. She was very tough when she was working, and that sometimes threw people off who thought, oh, this is going to be fun and games with the Queen of Comedy. No, it wasn't. When you worked with Lucy, you worked. And I think Elizabeth had a few words with her, had a word beginning with a C. It's a very impolite word to call a woman. Beginning with a C. I'm sure you can figure it out. It's a 4-letter word. And Elizabeth Taylor sometimes would call Lucy Miss C word. But I don't think they had real problems with each other. Let's see here. Yeah, Mike Todd, but yeah, Joan Blondell did have a connection with him and all. I don't know. I haven't heard on that. That'd be something to look into. I'm sorry I don't have any stories for you. Yeah, Andy, I know it's 8:50. Got to hurry here. Well, actually, a studio audience is about 350 people. I know because I've been in studio audiences before. Oh, and one of those times was when Lucy was doing her last series, Life with Lucy. I sat in the audience. I got to watch Lucy work in front of the cameras. It's quite amazing. But yeah, I'm sure that audience was quite shocked. No, not Cheetos, Andy. A 4-letter word. It's a very vulgar, obscene word used to describe female genitalia. Does that make it easier for you? It's very, very insulting to call a woman that. And anyway, that was the word Elizabeth used for Lucy. Miss C word. No, not Cove. No. Cheers. I really try to keep my language clean on here. I've even tried to do it on Whimsy Show, even when we talk about more serious things, but not sure quite what the guidelines are. And of course, Anastasia, as you know, she has less qualms about censoring herself, but that's just Anastasia being Anastasia, and she's wonderful. And I know she's going to be terrific on her show in a few minutes. Yes, Jim, it rhymes with stunt. And I apologize. I never mean this to be offensive to any of my viewers, especially the wonderful ladies out there. I never mean that. I don't use that word myself. I'm just relaying the story here and trying to do it in a polite way. But Anastasia says it. Sometimes I watch her show and I'm like, but she's a free spirit and she's just being herself. And I'm very, very proud of her for what she does. And I'm glad she's doing her live streams. And it's been very healthy for her. And I know that all of you who have come to join her, it's meant the world to her. And it's a wonderful form of expression for her. And oh God, I see just a note from Anastasia popped in, but I'm not going to read it now. It's a private note, but she's coming on in a few minutes. So I think I should, unless anybody has another topic or question or anything, I think I will gracefully sign out here. Thank you, Jim, for your comment. No need to apologize. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and sign out. I'll be here next week for you. I try to adhere to 5 p.m., but as you know, it's sometimes like trying to pull the brakes on a locomotive train, and that train doesn't always come to a complete stop. And so more often than late, I've had to be late going on here, but I just thank you tremendously for your loyalty, your support. You're very good to me, and I appreciate every one of you. The Barrymores. I'm sure I can come up with some stories next week. Just remind me, Andy. I'm already thinking of a few. But anyway, I will be on the Oracle of Whimsy, that channel for Taco Tuesdays, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And she also has me on her Thursday show now at the exact same time and place. Those are the shows where I have to really do my homework. I usually spend the day immersing myself in news stories, and sometimes the news stories are pretty yucky and horrible, but I don't want to be a deer in the headlights. I want to be able to talk about the subjects because we do get a lot of questions on there, and I'm proud to do it. And I'm proud to do it along with my very dear friend, Dr. Whimsy Anderson. And Anastasia and I need to do another show together. We've talked about that. Guess I should guest on her show, or she should guest on this. We've certainly have done enough things in the past, like our very ribald red carpet Oscar coverage. We figured, well, Joan Rivers is dead, so we have to pick up the slack, and we'll let Joan Rivers channel through us. Anastasia and I are very good at insulting couture on the red carpet. We get quite catty and bitchy. Yeah, I'll try to pop into Anastasia's stream for a little bit. Many times I have to have her on in the background. I'm still working on stuff, and right now I'm still working on all what I talked about, all these boxes and things. I want to try to get some more tamed down this evening, so I can at least walk around in here and get some stuff ready to take back to the storage unit. Wish I had stories on the Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers. I can come up with stuff on the Marx Brothers. I never was a big follower of the Three Stooges. I know a little, and I mentioned things like by Lucille Ball, one of the very first movies she ever made was a short subject in 1934 with the Three Stooges. Um, I'm sure I can come up with some things, but Marx Brothers, oh, they're fun to talk about. They were quite outrageous. Oh, Renee, thank you. Thank you very much. I so appreciate all your lovely compliments and your messages. And um, it's always very encouraging to me. Very encouraging. And it's in that in itself is reason to keep doing this live stream. So I thank you. And let's see, it's 6:55. I'm looking at the clock at the top of my laptop here. That's 5 minutes to give Anastasia chance to shine. We've even joked that Mondays are like a double feature since a lot of you go from this show over to her show on her channel, The Sacred Spears. So thank you, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.